Welcome, everyone. We're just going to wait a few seconds for attendees to join us. Welcome, everyone. I'm Emily Loper, Vice President of Public Policy at the Bay Area Council. We have a great lineup of speakers who are with us today to talk about how self-driving cars and trucks are truly revolutionizing how we move things around the country. These companies are operating autonomous freight hauling and delivery services, and some are also doing ride hailing, but we're focusing on how these technologies are changing the goods movement industry today. So it wasn't long ago when the idea of self-driving vehicles seemed so futuristic, but these companies are already operating these services in other regions of the country. So welcome to the future. We'll hear brief presentations on the services and technology from each of our presenters, and then we'll host a moderated discussion, and we'll leave some time for questions from the audience at the end. So please submit your questions at any time through the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. Our speakers today are Dan Mitchell, Senior Manager of City and Community Engagement at Nuro, Carter Stern, Senior Government Affairs Manager at Cruz, Sydney Jornell, Government Relations Manager at Aurora, and Aidan Ali Sullivan, State Policy and Government Affairs at Waymo. So we will start with Dan Mitchell, who is going to give us a live demo. Dan, over to you.
Thanks so much, Emily, and thanks Bay Area Council for putting this together. This is such an important issue. I'm actually here today live at the Silicon Valley Bike Coalition annual summit in Millbrae, where we have R2, our zero occupant vehicle from Nuro, where we're talking to folks at the Bike Coalition about the safe designs as well as our vehicle technology. Before I get into a quick demo of the vehicle, I want to maybe talk a little bit about Nuro as a company. Nuro was founded 6 years ago. We actually have a great video that we just put out celebrating our 6th anniversary, talking about kind of where we've been, but also where we're going. Nuro was founded to focus just on autonomous vehicles for delivery services. So package, groceries, other items that you might need delivered at home, with again a focus on local neighborhood delivery with our zero occupant vehicles. It's something we're really excited about because today with current existing delivery services or how people get goods and items, it's really not something that's sustainable. We believe that local delivery powered by these zero occupant vehicles can really help make sure that grocery delivery, food delivery is affordable and equitable. It can make our streets safer with the autonomous technology that's always paying attention, always looking out for vulnerable road users. It can also revitalize our local economy with providing jobs for local businesses that are doing deliveries to their neighborhood. Let me go ahead and actually dive into what that experience might look like. So as a customer, Nuro has partnered with Kroger grocery stores, Domino's Pizza, 7-Eleven. Actually, we have an active service today in Mountain View, California with our autonomous vehicles, and 7-Eleven. So customers order directly from the business or the customer, or the business that they are doing, that they frequent on a regular basis. Those customers then get a text message from Nuro once the vehicle has picked up the items and the vehicle is on its way. So customers can actually track via an app where the vehicle is and as it's going on the way to there. Once the vehicle gets in front of someone's house, the customer actually approaches the vehicle, there's a screen here where the customer will go ahead and enter their code. This is a unique code for just their deliveries or their items. And so you can see as the door opens, we have an empty compartment here where groceries, pizza, snacks, other items can be delivered. And today we're showing off what an additional marketplace, something like a convenience store might be for customers. And so you can see that in the second compartment here. This vehicle design and interaction, again, is custom built with for just delivery services, leveraging that autonomous technology for these neighborhood deliveries. These vehicles are street legal vehicles. You can actually see we have a license plate on the front and the back of the vehicle there. And they're built a little bit narrower to fit into the neighborhood local streets that we drive in and operating in. These vehicles are currently classified as a low speed vehicle, which means they have a top speed of 25 miles per hour, which is perfect for the neighborhood streets where, you know, there might be kids out in the street playing, cyclists biking around, or kind of tight spaces to get into. That narrower width really helps with that local delivery service. This is something we're really, really excited about as a company, and something that we hope we can expand to within our out of our Mountain View and Palo Alto current test areas where these vehicles are on the road today, into other areas throughout the Bay Area. We do also have operations in Houston, Texas. We've done deliveries in Arizona with these zero occupant vehicles, and we have a new testing site in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm really excited about this conversation and to hear what other panelists have to say as well. So really excited to be here. Let me jump to another room where we can have a more intimate conversation, and looking forward to answering all your questions that you have about Nuro and these autonomous vehicles.
Great, thank you, Dan. Now we'll turn it over to Carter Stern with Cruz.
There we go. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Carter Stern. I am a government affairs manager with Cruz. As you can probably tell from my accent, I am not from the Bay Area. I am located in Houston, Texas, and did in fact see a few Nuro vehicles driving through my neighborhood this morning. So I can confirm that Dan and Nuro are alive and active down here in Houston. My background is in tech transportation, and really looking forward to chatting with all of you today about what Cruz is up to, as well as just a more robust conversation with my colleagues sitting around the Zoom screen about the future of delivery and autonomy in the US and beyond. So I think first, there we go, a little bit of Zoom hiccup there. So who is Cruz? I think most importantly, we are an all-electric, self-driving company that is designing and deploying fleets of fully electric autonomous vehicles. So the goal is not to sell a vehicle to an individual to then operate autonomously, but to rather operate these large fleets for the purposes of both ride-hailing service, which we currently operate right now in San Francisco, as well as delivery, which we are running right now in Arizona. The plan, of course, is to, as we learn, continue to learn and get better, to grow those services outside of those markets. But that is where we are right now. So a little bit about the history. Founded in 2013. In 2016, we were acquired by GM, which gave us this really amazing opportunity. Silicon Valley is amazing at designing tech. Detroit has a little over a century's experience worth of designing and building vehicles. So it gave us this really amazing partner that will allow us to scale and design vehicles around autonomy, which we'll discuss a little bit later. In 2017, we began testing in Arizona. The Governor Ducey, who is still governor for a little bit longer, was governor at the time, issued an executive order authorizing the deployment and testing these vehicles on public roads. It was an obvious place for us to go and begin learning. And then in 2020, we launched what was then a delivery pilot program with Walmart. So Cruz does not operate or intend to build or operate large 18-wheeler vehicles autonomously. Instead, we're doing more of the last mile. So in the case of our partnership with Walmart, it is doing delivery to a customer's house from a local Walmart store. So a lot of operation on public roads, a lot of shorter trips, but a piece of the market that I think was not really being met yet, that we are really focused on. So, and just if I can just brag for just half a moment, in San Francisco, off the topic of delivery, we're also the first company that's received all the permits required to operate a commercial service, ride-hailing service for a fair. So Bay Area, San Francisco is our home, though it is not where I live. Sometimes I feel like it is where I live, and a place where we are continuing to focus resources and attention, given that it has been a leader in technology for a long time. So in the program in Arizona, it began operating out of a single store, and we were all lined up and ready to go, and then realized that the store was half located on the the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community land, which presented this really interesting jurisdictional question. So while we were all good on the state side, we then had to go work with the local tribal council to make sure we were all set up. They didn't even have a permit at that time, as you can imagine, for autonomous vehicles. So we're very close with that community and worked with them on jobs development as well. But that was the single store that we served as part of the pilot program. After 9 months, things were going well, so we decided to expand to additional stores. We're currently operating out of 4 different stores in Greater Phoenix. There are a bunch of cities of varying size around Phoenix. So working with every mayor, every city council, and most importantly, or equally importantly, every fire and first responder community out there. But the plan, of course, as we look to, it's hard to imagine we're more than halfway through 2022, but looking towards the end of the year and then beyond, continuing to scale that service to add more stores, likely more partners, and then move outside of Arizona into other markets to bring the service to other states. So another big piece, I think there's a lot of discussion about AVs and why AVs are really important. Obviously, safety is probably the biggest consideration. Vehicles don't get drunk, they don't get tired, they don't have a fight with their spouse and text them while they should be operating their vehicle. And if you look at a lot of the data, that's where the cause of most accidents come from. And so removing the human element, I know we all like to think that we're amazing drivers, myself included, but we are often the cause of our own problems. So removing that human driver presents an amazing opportunity to make vehicles safer and to make our roads safer. But on top of that, I think that as these new operators, such as Cruz and my fellow members of industry, begin operating around the world, there's a really tremendous opportunity to realize the benefits of the electrification of transport. So Cruz is electric. We have always been electric, both the Chevy Bolt vehicle that you see in this slide, as well as in vehicles that I'll get to the next slide that we are designing that are purpose-built around autonomy. But this allows us to shift a tremendous portion of VMT, whether it's getting someone to the store or getting goods from the store to the person, to reduce emissions that are plaguing a lot of our major cities that have been, I'll speak for my home state, that has been built around the personal electric or the personal gas-powered vehicle, to realize a lot of those benefits of reduced congestion and emissions. Finally, the next, I think we've all been operating, except for Nuro, which has an amazing vehicle, which I love to see. We've really been operating these vehicles that were built around the paradigm of a human driver. And that was an important first step as we were designing autonomous vehicles and testing the technology. But the next major step that everyone is going to take is to design vehicles that remove the driver entirely. So this is a picture of or a GIF of our what we call our origin vehicle, which we've already begun producing. It is built around autonomy, so there is no steering wheel, there is no brake pedal, there is no rear view mirror. And that allows us to increase the cabin space. So in here, you'll see it set up for a ride-hail service. So seating for 6, a lot of leg room, but because it's modular, we can also create we can outfit it to do delivery as well. So that vehicle can be dual purpose or multiple purpose, which presents a really flexible platform on which we can operate autonomous vehicles. What is challenging about this, as you can imagine, is that when you remove all this equipment that is required for a human driver, you sometimes run into challenges around the federal motor vehicle safety standards, which were written with a human driver in mind. So working with federal regulators to make sure that we have all the approvals necessary to launch these vehicles on public roads is going to be a big piece of unlocking the potential of these scaled services. And then, of course, working with states to make sure that we have the right frameworks in place to deploy vehicles. And then with the at the local level, as an electric fleet, one of the big challenges that we have, and one of the areas of collaboration that we have with the locals, is finding enough electricity to power these large fleets of vehicles is going to be a tremendous challenge. And it requires everything from working with utilities and power generation, all the way down to permitting. So, you start thinking about it, if I'm going to build a garage and put a bunch of chargers in there, that's a big permitting challenge as well. But it's going to be crucial to, again, as I said earlier, unlocking the real potential of these services at scale. So that is Cruz. I am most excited about hearing all your questions, so don't hold any back. And with that, I will pass it off to my colleague. Emily, help me. Who's next?
Sydney Jornell. Yes.
Thank you,
Sydney
Carter.
Jornell.
Thank you. Let me pull it up. All right, let me know if you can't see it or hear me. Thank you, everybody. I'm Sydney Jornell. I'm on the government relations team at Aurora and very excited to be here to share more about what we're working on. So the fleet that you see here, this is the various vehicles that you might see our technology on. So not just your minivans, but also your semi trucks. And we're partnered with Volvo and PACCAR, some of the largest trucking manufacturers, as well as Toyota on the minivan side. Since we are a self-driving tech company, first and foremost is safety. So I always like to start off with this. We've posted online our safety case framework, which is a holistic approach to safety and is interactive and has lots of pieces of evidence for our vehicles to be on the road. So I highly encourage you to take a look at that. And it's all available online. But to give you a little bit of background on the technology itself, I'm often asked, so do you manufacture your vehicles or not? So we at Aurora, we don't manufacture our vehicles. We develop what we call the Aurora driver, and that is made up of the software, the hardware, and the maps and the offboard support and all of that. And so we can put that technology on trucks, on passenger vehicles. It's essentially vehicle agnostic. And I'm going to spend most of the time focusing on our trucks, but we do have minivans as well, Toyota Siennas. The technology behind this, there's a lot that goes into it. So I am breezing through this in one slide, but there is incredible simulation, very detailed maps. We've got radar, cameras, LiDAR, a lot goes into this. I'm highlighting here our first light LiDAR because this was really engineered for highway driving. It can see a lot further than your traditional LiDAR, less interference, and also can measure both range and velocity. And this is really what helps us drive on highways at highway speeds. And when we're on these highways, we see a lot of interesting things. So certainly we drive around many vulnerable road users. This here shows you motorcycles doing wheelies in Texas. And this is something we learn, and we drive around these various, things that you wouldn't expect. And all of those learnings are transferred across the fleet. So what this vehicle learns from this encounter is transferred to the trucks, to the passenger cars as well. So jumping in just on the actual pilots that we have, I wanted to focus much of the time on that. We are hauling loads in Texas, Dallas, Houston, El Paso. Some of our collaborators in terms of carriers are FedEx, Werner, and Schneider. We also work with network collaborators like US Express and Covenant, and brokers like Uber Freight. And I'll dive a little deeper into what that means. These are some of the routes that we have. So for example, you can see there's routes with FedEx, Uber Freight, Werner, and then the latest one is with Schneider, and didn't have time to update the slides just yet since we just recently announced that. But we are hauling loads for them, doing our small part for the supply chain. And for example, with FedEx, we've been working with them for over a year now. We've delivered over 335 loads, 80,000 miles. And what I think is key to our partners is that it was 100% on time arrival performance and no cancellations. So we're pretty proud of that. And the way we envision this evolving in terms of the business model is that this will be a subscription type model. So your carriers like Werner, Schneider, they will add the Aurora driver to their vehicles and pay a fee per mile to have that technology on their autonomous trucks. And then it'll be terminal to terminal. So for the time being, we are developing and building depots around El Paso, Fort Worth, Houston, and many of these depots are in smaller towns in those metro areas. For example, we have one in Palmer near near Fort Worth and Aledo near El Paso. And we're investing in these areas as we grow and expand our operations in each of those areas. And so I'm going to show a short video, which I think does better justice as to the pilots that we currently have. And this is a video from FedEx.
We are hauling freight autonomously between Dallas and Houston and Fort Worth and El Paso on a nightly basis. We are maintaining our on-time standards that we expect in FedEx Express.
Here at Aurora, safety is our #1 priority. Our dispatchers will work with FedEx to come up with a good testing plan, come up with a good plan for us to haul goods. We have a very efficient feedback loop between vehicle operators and developers. They're able to tweak the code, update this virtually, and send it back out to us.
FedEx Dallas South will bring a trailer to our South Dallas facility in Palmer, Texas. After it's inspected, we will autonomously move that trailer to the Houston facility, where they will then reassign us the trailer coming back to our South Dallas facility.
With a lane like this between us and Houston, it's a good opportunity for both of these hubs to see the type of technology and the type of innovation that FedEx is bringing in for all of us.
So that's a short video that I hope does it a bit more justice than what I explained. But the other thing that we often get asked is, so why autonomous trucks? Why do this? What is the value in it? And we see tremendous value for our trucking partners. And I'll run through just a few of these, but certainly there are benefits in terms of the supply chain. These are vehicles that in the future will be able to run 24 hours a day. So you can start to imagine being able to cover the entire state of California within a day, even the entire US within a day with distribution centers. This is technology that can also help alleviate the driver shortage. We see today over 80,000 driver shortage. That's going to rise even more so. Workforce is aging out when we think about truckers, and there's also high turnover, over 90%. So this is a way to help address that gap. Certainly safety is one of the benefits. There are 500,000 US large truck crashes on our roads today. And I think many of my colleagues alluded to this. A lot of human error is often involved in some of these crashes and accidents. And then lastly, but not least, we envision that there'll be over 10% fuel and emissions reduction potential. And that's just from the way that these vehicles accelerate, decelerate, that you can deploy them off peak, and that you can also, that they will follow the speed limits, which for trucks in California is 55 miles per hour. And that's just on the current trucks that we have today. In the future, as these trucks are powered by different sources of energy, whether it's hydrogen, whatever it may be, our technology is vehicle agnostic. So we can imagine putting that tech on a different vehicle that may have even greater emissions reductions. So you'll notice that most of what I talked about, in fact, all of what I talked about was around our pilots in Texas. And this is for a main reason that we can't actually test and deploy our autonomous trucks here in California. And that's something that we are hoping the DMV will start a rulemaking and subsequent regulation so that we will be permitted to test and deploy here. But for the interim, we are testing at our test track. So you'll see a few of them here. We do edge cases there, and certainly we can't haul loads. So we can't, we can't do our small part there, but we are learning from these test tracks. And again, I'm hopeful that one day the tech that we are creating here will actually be able to deploy here in California. And with that, I will pass it to Aiden.
Wonderful. Thanks everyone for joining. First off, thanks Emily for organizing this, and appreciate the Bay Area Council taking an interest in this topic. It's something that I think is going to be very transformative for all of us and for the built environment. So it's exciting to see what it means for California. A little bit about myself, Aiden Alex Sullivan. I lead our Western US government relations public policy at the state level for Waymo. Waymo, if you are not familiar with it, is one of companies under the Alphabet Group. And we are operating here in California along with a couple states I'll dig into for you. So I will briefly share my screen and hopefully you can continue to see everything and hear me. So Waymo is building the world's most experienced driver, and that's what we're really focused on here. The vehicles that you see on the screen are 3 of the platforms that we're operating that I will discuss with you over this discussion. A little bit of background. So our beginnings, the company was started in 2009 as the Google self-driving car project, which a lot of you have probably heard of. And if you're a Bay Area native, would have seen cars driving around in the early days, looking funny like some of the cars on the right-hand side of the screen here. In those early days, we started to look at building in-house sensors and to really identify, look, is there a possibility to build a car that could drive itself? And after a couple of years of doing a lot of in-house work, we recognized that there was significant opportunity and decided to focus on building out a fully autonomous vehicle. Some of the early vehicles on the right-hand side of the slide, we operated Prius vehicles as well as Lexus SUVs, and then the bottom vehicle was one of our early self-built vehicles. In 2016, we were spun out as a separate company. So Waymo is an independent company, and we are really focused on building what we call the Waymo driver, which is the autonomous systems that go into and onto the vehicles that we're operating. Similar to some of my colleagues here, we don't build vehicles. We're not a vehicle manufacturer. We build the systems that go into and onto vehicles. And we partner with a variety of OEM manufacturers. So one of our partners is Chrysler, which is the Pacifica minivan manufacturer that you're seeing on the screen here. The exciting thing about our technology, oftentimes when I'm meeting with electeds, they'll ask, well, how long until we're able to actually experience the technology? And we've been operating the Chrysler Pacifica minivans that you saw on the previous slide for over 2 years now in a fully commercialized operation in Arizona. So if anyone ever makes it out to the Phoenix area, you can download the Waymo app on your phone. It operates, it's totally open to the public. I jokingly like to say we're ready to take your money and offer you service. So feel free to try it out and experience it. It's here, there's no one in the front seat. The car pulls up, totally independent. It takes off with the steering wheel turning itself. It's quite amazing to see it in person. And as I mentioned, we've been operating that now for over 2 years in the Phoenix area. Now, while the passenger service is certainly important to us, and we've been operating that in Arizona, as I mentioned, we're here to talk a little bit more about goods movement. And we also have a goods movement vertical of the company, which what I want to point out is really the same hardware and software systems that we operate in our passenger vehicles. So it's basically attuned to a trucking vehicle. However, it's the same Waymo driver in both of these platforms. The trucks that we're operating are both long haul and short haul, and you can see 2 of them on screen right here. The large scale truck, the big rig that we're operating, that is currently operating in Texas, as a few of my colleagues are operating in Texas, and hope someone asks us why we're operating in Texas and not California. We'd love to dig into that. Additionally, we have short haul or last mile delivery vehicles with our Chrysler Pacifica platform. For us on the Waymo Via side, which is what we refer to our trucking services as, we really see this as supplementary to the existing trucking ecosystem. And so oftentimes folks ask, what will the impacts of trucks be on the economy and on jobs, et cetera? And the way that we really think about this is how can we supplement and be additive to the existing framework? And so we're working with folks that you see on the screen here. So with tier 1 manufacturers, with fleet providers, with shippers, and we really see this as sort of a plus up to the existing ecosystem. As Sydney mentioned, and we'll all agree, there's a significant shortage of truck drivers in the US. And so if we're able to help provide this solution, I think that there's great opportunity for us to be a partner within the existing trucking ecosystem. On the trucking side, and I mentioned that we're operating in Texas. On screen here, this is our first trucking facility. And actually, we opened this up about a month and a half ago, and pardon the lack of professionalism in the photo. This was taken with my iPhone. I was out there a couple of weeks ago, and we were able to have a ribbon cutting ceremony. For us, this is really central to our operations in the state. And we are currently on a daily basis moving loads for our commercial partners between Dallas and Houston. It's a couple-hour drive. They're all originating from this facility. And we're really excited about the operations in Texas. I think it presents a great opportunity for us to actually show the commercial operations And we're looking forward to being able to transit this to California in the near future. On that trucking piece, so why are we all talking about Texas and the southern half of the US? I think we would all agree that, at least on the trucking side, there's a real focus on the I-10 corridor. And so the goal would be to be able to drive a truck from Port of Los Angeles along I-10 all the way across the country to Florida. Within that, right now, our focus is on the Houston piece of that southern map. And a lot of that is based on regulatory reasons. And so, as you can see, right now we're operating in Dallas and Houston, but our goal really long-term is to be able to bridge that coast-to-coast platform and have the vehicles operating across country. So very briefly, those are a couple quick images and pictures of our operations. I'm happy to answer any additional questions. I know we're trying to get more time for participants to speak to us, so I will turn it back over to Emily and we'll open it up to participant questions. Thanks, everyone.
Great, thank you, Aiden. Thank you all. Those were great overviews of your technologies and service here. So I think before we get into the discussion, it would be helpful to clarify the technology that we're talking about here, right? So that this, can you clarify how this autonomous technology differs from, say, the self-driving features that are now increasingly common in personal vehicles?
Happy to briefly speak, and Carter took his mic off too, so I'm sure he'll have something to say. I think for us, there's a real distinction between driver assistance technologies versus fully autonomous vehicles. And within that sort of spectrum, there is basically numerology. So the Society of Automotive Engineers has standards for differentiating driver assistance versus fully autonomous vehicles. That distinction is really around whether or not you need a human in the car. And so a fully autonomous vehicle doesn't need a human to drive it. It can be fully driven by that ADS system. You don't need a person behind the wheel. And that's that real distinction. Whereas what we might find commercially available for purchase today on cars is really driver assistance technology. It allows the driver to perhaps reduce their engagement. However, they still need to be present in the vehicle to take control if necessary. Whereas fully autonomous or level 4 of SAE automation vehicles don't need a human to take control. They can be operated fully by the ADS system. Carter, anything you want to add there?
No, that was a good way to put it. I said, if something is called fully self-driving, you can go buy it. It is not fully self-driving would be the most concise way I would put it.
Great. Thank you both. That's helpful. So we know that obviously the pandemic and this global supply chain crisis has really put increasing strain on the goods movement operations in the country. And you touched on these in your presentations, but I'm hoping you can elaborate on how this technology improves the efficiency of goods movement operations and helps to ease those supply chain bottlenecks.
I'm happy to jump in on this. I know I briefly mentioned this in the presentation as well, but we're seeing in our pilots in Texas, we're already hauling loads, right? And it may be a small part to begin with, but we are hauling loads for FedEx, Schneider, Werner, and others. And in the future, as this technology evolves, these are vehicles that don't have hours of service limitations, so they'll be able to travel 24 hours a day off peak, so not during congested periods. And that really drops the amount of time it'll take to get, imagine from an LA to a Houston or other destinations. So we see a lot of benefits there. And I think with all that we've heard in the news about the supply chain crisis, even those, starting to work on that, right, will lead to tremendous potential in the future.
Yeah, I'll jump in here for a second as well. I'm in a different area. It's a beautiful sunny day outside in Millbrae, so everyone get a chance to go outside. But I think with Nuro and our local delivery service, we saw an increase in just demand for deliveries like grocery, food delivery during the pandemic. And I think that's a trend we're going to see. I don't think any of us predicted that this was going to happen when our company was founded 6 years ago. But it's something that we've seen that increase in demand for delivery services. We also found a new use case for our vehicles. We were actually at the San Mateo Event Center, which was set up as a quarantine location where folks who may have tested positive and couldn't be at home or needed to quarantine, our zero occupant vehicles with, again, no one inside, were used as a food delivery platform to get people the food without exposing more people. And so that was something where there was a new use case actually discovered for our vehicles. And I think we're going to continue to see new use cases for these vehicles as well.
Great, thank you. So the next question is about just elaborating on the safety benefits. All of your presentations touched on this, but I think that, sometimes people may be alarmed by the idea of a semi, going down the highway with no driver in the vehicle. So can you just elaborate on the safety benefits and removing that, human element and error from the operations?
Yeah, I mean, I think, most of the data, that publicly available data is upwards of 90% of accidents are caused by driver inattention, driver impairment. And so if it sounds like a simple solution to a very complex problem, it's because it's relatively straightforward. People are really bad at operating vehicles. They drive too fast, they don't pay attention, they look at their phone. Not that anybody on this call would ever look at their phone while driving, but it's behavior that's remarkably tolerated and socially acceptable. And so pulling that human out of that vehicle takes the most dangerous part of that vehicle out of the equation. And I think autonomy can sound, getting behind the wheel of a vehicle that doesn't have a human operator can feel weird. The same way getting in an Uber or Lyft felt really weird the first time I did it a decade ago. And you thought, I'm with a stranger and I don't have cash. And who are they? How does this work? And now we do it without thinking about it. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is that autonomy in one form or another is already remarkably prevalent in other modes of transportation. So we all get on a plane, that plane takes off, and we sail over the Pacific Ocean or across the US without giving a single thought to the fact that it's being operated by a computer. We've also seen a lot of autonomy already in farm vehicles, in mining vehicles. And so the technology is further along. I think the commercialization that's happening right now around consumer-facing technology feels very new, but there's a lot of technological innovation behind that. And the last piece I'll add, I always get these sort of, side comments, autonomy is always 5 years away, it's always 5 years away. And I think that is indicative of the fact that all of these companies appreciate, it's not just a talking point, we appreciate that safety is absolutely the most important thing that we can possibly measure. And so it is going to be slow and conservative. And that's because we understand the gravity of putting vehicles on public roads. And that to me it gives me some reassurance. This is not the days of TNCs or bikes and scooters where there's 1 million units on the roads tomorrow and it's chaos. It's a very deliberate process that everyone on this call is a part of. And so, it's new feels different until it doesn't, and it becomes every day.
Emily, if I can just get it perhaps a bit more granular here to that safety value proposition. So agree with everything that Carter said. And I appreciate the airplane analogy because I often bring that up as well. But on that safety piece, when you think about the technology, indeed, the reason that cars get into accidents is because of drivers making mistakes or being impaired. My vehicle, my Waymo driver, can see 300 yards in all directions, in front of it, behind it, and it is identifying movement. It's identifying and plotting movement of items, of individuals, of other cars in real time. And so, it is inherently a better set of eyes, if you will, than my human eyes, right? And so if you think about, well, why is it safer? It's because it can see better and it can identify better than you and I can, and then it can react better than you and I can. And so that's where I think the real sort of, how is it safer? Well, it's because it's able to see better and it's able to react in a quicker, more real-time fashion than you and I can.
Great, thank you. Really helpful. So we have a lot of questions in the chat. I know this is going to be the main question of the day is why are these technologies not operating here? What is it about the Arizona and Texas regulatory environment that enables you to operate there, and what needs to change in California?
Aiden, I'm happy to start off and then maybe we can tag team this. So that is a good question. And being born and raised here in California, I would love to see our tech deployed here. So the main reason for that, as I alluded to, was that currently there are no regulations that permit us to test and deploy here. So back in 2012, there was legislation passed in California to allow for autonomous vehicle testing and deployment. And the DMV has done a great job in just the proof that we have ride hailing, autonomous ride hailing. We've got Nuro vehicles delivering goods, right? And Cruz and Waymo. So there's been tremendous, gains there. But when it comes to autonomous trucking, that rulemaking hasn't started yet. So until that starts, we can't actually test and deploy. So that's for us a huge, something we think about a lot, because we are bringing this technology here. We have offices in SF and Mountain View, but much of that tech is shipped and exported to other states, in this case, Texas. So that's the main one, but I'll pass it to Aiden to add anything as well.
Yeah, the only other thing I'll add, how would it happen and what is the hindrance? As Sydney mentioned, there is legislation already in place. There is not a need for any legislative action. Really, it's a regulatory proceeding that would have to happen, and it can and would be initiated by the DMV, theoretically under the direction of the executive branch here in California. And so I think that's something that we as an industry have really been working on in Sacramento to say, look, what do we need to do? How do we get this process started? Because, I think if you talk to most folks, they would like to see the technology, they'd like to see the investment, they'd like to see the jobs, the development here in California. And as you think about California as the birthplace of our companies, as the birthplace of innovation, and yet I'm in Texas a month ago cutting a ribbon on a facility to operate our autonomous trucks. It is, a little bit disappointing, and I think it's something that California still has an opportunity to start to redirect and attract that investment. But we're hoping that we'll be able to have traction on this, and we've been working as an industry overall to get that movement. The other piece I'll say, sort of conversely, while California has created sort of a disincentive or a lack of ability to operate, as Carter touched on, in Arizona, and is also the case in Texas, really great frameworks, laws that were passed that basically create a welcoming ecosystem for us to operate in both of those states through the legislative action and then also through regulatory regulations. And so I think it's also a testament to the good relationships that we have in both those states and the environment that they've created to say, look, we want this technology, we want these jobs, we want this investment. And so we as a company have said, as one of those inputs, it has a great regulatory environment and it's welcoming, like, let's take advantage of that so that we can continue to proceed with the development of the technology. Instead of saying, well, we can't operate in California, so we're just going to wait. We had to make decisions and say, let's continue that development. And so we've continued it in other states.
Great. Thanks, Aiden. We have a related question. There's a number of questions in the chat about this, about just general attitudes about autonomous vehicles. We have one great question here from Danny Wan, the executive director of the Port of Oakland, who's also the co-chair of our council's Goods Movement Committee. And he asked, in the recent Inflation Reduction Act, there's $3 billion for electrification of ports, yet the funding is only restricted to, quote, human operated equipment. Do you see this as a trend in the administration or Congress to restrict government investment, a bias against automation? And a related, question about trucking associations like the American Trucker Association support for driverless technologies. So maybe Aiden can start with that one.
Yeah, I appreciate the question there. I wouldn't go so far as to say there's a bias. I think there's obviously concerns with, how the technology will impact the future of work. And I think that's something that we as an industry have been and will continue to do a significant amount of education on, explaining to people how the technology works, explaining to people what the opportunities are. The way that I like to sort of speak of this, it's not a elimination of human input, it's a transition, right? It's a shifting of what those human inputs look like. On the trucking side, like what we're focused on is really automating the monotonous driving part of trucking. It's not eliminating human inputs from trucking. And so if I can have my truck operating long haul between Dallas and Houston, going 55 miles an hour overnight, that's great. And then if I can have a human driving a truck in the city, doing the last mile delivery, being able to go home to their families at night, I think that's better for everyone, right? And so, we're really looking at how can we, as I mentioned, be additive to this. And I think that's a education piece that needs to continue. I think there's obviously concern about impact on jobs, and I think we're seeing that here in California. I think we're seeing that, in this example. So there's opportunity, right? I think there's great opportunity for us as an industry to say, look, like, how can we support the economy overall, and how can we alleviate concerns that folks might have as it relates to the future of work?
And sorry, go ahead, Dan.
So I just wanted to jump in and say, at the local level where Nuro's operating in these local neighborhoods, we rely on local neighborhood businesses to have that relationship with our customer where we just complete the delivery portion of that interaction. And so the businesses that we are working with, we're actually seeing they're hiring more people to help them fulfill the demand for local goods, not more than just what Nuro is hiring on to do that. But I'd also like everyone to think for a second, like, how did you get groceries this last week? I would imagine in most cases, you went to the store and did it yourself. That's the job we're replacing. Your chore, your errand of going to the store and getting items at a very, very, very low cost with our local neighborhood delivery powered by this autonomous technology. And so we're hoping actually to increase the economic output of the state and in these neighborhoods where we're operating. We're also partnering with local schools as well as community colleges. I think some of the other companies can also speak to some of their work that they're doing at this level. But for Nuro, it's working with De Anza Community College, one of the local great schools we have here in the Bay Area that has a really great automotive technician certificate, training people to be garage mechanics and things like that. What we've worked with them on is how do we add autonomous technology as well as electric technology onto that certificate program. So we're training people to do the maintenance and care of our autonomous electric vehicles that we have operating in these neighborhoods. It's a really, really great local partnership that's creating more jobs in these local communities where we're operating.
And I'll just briefly add that, to Aidan and Dan's point about workforce and economic impact, there are a number of studies out there by USDOT, SVLG Foundation, Uber Freight, and all of them point to this idea that there is in fact a positive impact when it comes to GDP, when it comes to jobs, when we think about the current context and the shortage and the turnover. And that many of these long haul truckers, and I'm talking specifically about autonomous trucks, but that many of these long haul trucking jobs, they're difficult. And they can actually now start to think about transitioning to short haul, where they're now going to be at home with their families. So happy to share those links. And then just adding on to what Dan mentioned, we recognize that there's a need to train and reskill. So we recently announced a partnership with Pittsburgh Technical, a program focused on robotics and autonomous engineering. We also have had a program for many years with Gallatin College in Montana around LiDAR technicians for our technology, and then also working with Dallas College. So we're trying to do our part as well to help train that future workforce.
Great, thanks, Sydney. So the next question, we have several questions in the chat about just road operations in general. And this will obviously vary across your companies, but one is what happens when one of these autonomous vehicles has a flat tire, and how does a truck on the road refuel, or who does it, and how do you pay for it? The logistical questions of not having a driver.
I'll jump
Please,
in with the flat tire portion. I'll let the other folks address the refueling. But this has happened. We've had our zero occupant vehicle get a nail or a screw in the tire and end up with a flat tire. We are constantly monitoring though the vehicle and the vehicle systems. And so when that happens, we know right away and can either cease operations and pull over to avoid a blowout or some other type of catastrophic failure that someone driving their car might not actually know this until it's too late. We actually, with our technology, can see that ahead of time. And then we have our fleet of mechanics, as well as our operations personnel that can go out there and rescue the vehicle if it needs it.
Yeah, same for Cruz. I think our answer is the same way. An individual who has a flat tire fixes the car. They call, someone comes out there and fixes it, right? So same as Nuro, we're monitoring those vehicles. We know where they are at all time, what's happening, and we can go take care of any and all maintenance issues as they come up.
Great, thanks.
Someone needs to come up with a robot that changes tires. There's an opportunity.
It's $1 million idea, Aiden.
Yeah.
This is another related question to refueling, but we talked about the fully electric fleets, and how long do you think it will take to get sufficient charging stations to support these this electric fleet?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a while. I think, and this is tied into jobs. Like, I think that the electrification is going to be a jobs bonanza for labor. It is getting the vehicles on the road is probably easier than installing the needed charging infrastructure. And that goes for fleet vehicles, for Cruz, as well as for every other fleet operator, as well as just for individuals who want to have an electric vehicle themselves. I have an electric vehicle. We're not exactly progressive when it comes to electrification policy in Texas, but there are very few chargers that are not at my house. So it's going to be, and the other piece of that is, I think I saw a question in the chat around the incentives for electric infrastructure in some of these federal policies. Oftentimes they're incentivizing charging infrastructure for personal vehicles. I think that's fine. You know, many of those vehicles cost six figures, so we can sort of infer who those are helping out predominantly, which I think is a policy question. But I think it's going to take a long time. It's going to require close collaboration with everyone from the federal government and states around subsidies, incentives, as well as with the locals around making permitting easier. Because right now, permitting can be very difficult for large deployments of charging infrastructure.
Yeah, I want to pick up what Carter was saying around those partnerships or that collaboration. It's not just around the permitting, but also access to these chargers, right? Nuro is operating out of the grocery stores, the local restaurants, the downtown businesses. What can we do to partner to create more accessible charging for the general public, as well as for Nuro vehicles that are providing these delivery services locally? In Houston, Texas, where we have some of our operations as well. And as Carter was mentioning, there's not as much focus on electric vehicle infrastructure at the moment. We are having those discussions with city officials about how can we work together to create more accessible chargers for everyone in the community, including the Nuro vehicles. I think, you know, a lot of folks on this call are also thinking about that as well. And we'd love to have those discussions as we think about, you know, where Nuro's fleet expands, where those charging infrastructure is located, or where there's an eager partner to work with us on that charging infrastructure is definitely one of the considerations we have as well.
Great, thanks. We have a question from our member, John Fisher at WSP, about if you can discuss about how your companies are coordinating with ports and freight operators to coordinate on goods movement. It's probably for the trucking.
Yeah, and Emily, I'll just a quick thought here. So we are not working at the moment. Waymo is not working at the moment directly with any ports. We are working with airports. So being able to move freight from airports, I think there's great opportunity at the port, though, with investment that's taking place there, as well as with goods movement. A big piece of that, though, again, is this California part. And being able to unlock operations in California. So when you think about where are ports, well, they're on the coasts, and I think one of, if not the largest, at least for the West Coast, and one for the entire country, is the Port of Long Beach. And so being able to access California roads with our trucks is going to be key in order for us to engage with ports. So it's sort of a multi-step process here, a chicken before the egg, if you will. But we're certainly ready, willing, able, interested to engage with the ports, because I think that's where, you know, the start of movement is going to be taking place.
And similarly, we're doing terminal to terminal or a hub to hub model. So when it comes to ports, you know, we're again, as Aiden mentioned at Aurora, we're welcome to have those conversations. And I know that Danny asked a few questions on that, and he's done tremendous work in Oakland. But certainly always happy to discuss ways in which we could be helpful.
We have a question from an ABC reporter, David Louie. He asks, we've seen incidents of bricking where passenger AVs are unsure what to do. As you develop last mile delivery solutions, how will you address sidewalk congestion, pedestrian and bike traffic in urban settings to get to the front door of customers without creating a new problem? And is there a need for local policies to address that local planning? Maybe we start with Dan on this one because of the last mile delivery.
Yeah, we're on the road today, again, in Mountain View, Palo Alto, with our zero occupant vehicle, and throughout the Bay Area with our autonomous Toyota Prius vehicles, which again are retrofitted vehicles with the same sensor stack that we have for the autonomous technology. One of the reasons why I'm here at the Bike Coalition event is to talk with folks in the community about what these vehicles are doing and how they benefit the safety and create kind of new services and availability for folks that might be on a bike and can't carry all their groceries with them home from the store. And so these are ongoing conversations that we're having with local officials as well as police and fire departments as well. Nuro, again, with our monitoring of all the vehicles, we haven't experienced any of the local issues in terms of clogging up traffic or adding to those types of issues in the areas we're operating. But it's something that we're open to those conversations about how these vehicles will impact everyone who shares our city streets.
And then the only thing that I would add, sorry, go ahead, Aiden.
No, please.
Now, I was going to say, I think the way that we think about local policies when it comes to congestion of streets is if they're going to be, and I know it's a heavy, things like congestion pricing are a heavy lift in cities. And I think that we are largely supportive of those types of local policies, so long as they are vehicle type agnostic. So if we're going to have congestion pricing, let's do it for everybody, right? Because I think when we incentivize people taking shared transportation options, we can get rid of parking, we can do, there's other things that we can do that are good for the health of cities and make them more livable. And so I think those types of policies are things that we could be supportive of rather than those that target a specific type of transportation option.
Great. So we are close to the end of time here. So we'll just end by doing a quick lightning round of a 30-second conclusion from each of you about last things you'd like our audience to know. So why don't we start with Aiden here?
Wonderful. Well, thanks. It looks like we had almost 100 or about 100 folks joining this. So I appreciate the interest. I think it's really unique technology that we're all working on. And as I like to say, there's probably very few things in the world that will impact the built environment and how we as humans interact with space than transportation and what our technology is going to mean for transportation. So very excited to be able to be working in the space. I'm looking forward to continuing this effort here in California. Working with all my colleagues, and I certainly hope that with the support of Bay Area Council and others, we'll be able to get our heavy-duty operations going here in California. The last thing I'll say, if anyone gets out to the Phoenix area, please try out Waymo. It's super easy. It's as easy as using an Uber or Lyft, and I think really being able to put your body in a car and see it operate, seeing is really believing. And I think Carter would say the same for Cruz as well. So any opportunity you get to actually get in a vehicle of one of our operations, I'd highly recommend folks do so.
Great, thanks. Why don't we go to Carter next?
Sure. No, I think, I'm thankful for the opportunity to talk to everybody today. I think that transportation, we don't even realize how much we think about it, whether it's getting our groceries, like Dan was talking about, getting to school, getting to work, picking up kids. It's such an integral part of our life that I think we take it for granted. And on top of that, the latest NHTSA data that was released, I believe yesterday, showed that, again, traffic deaths are up by, I believe, 7%. And so it is so much a part of our everyday lives. I think we take for granted the carnage that's taking place on public roads. And whether it's, I used to practice law, and I remember I had some trucking accidents where people had not been doing what they were supposed to be doing in a truck, and there have been horrible accidents. And I think we've all know people that have been touched by traffic deaths or accidents in personal vehicles. And so there's this amazing opportunity to save lives, to make cities function better. but it's going to require us to lead, and for local governments to lead, and for interested third-party stakeholders that have that are interested in technology and making roads safer to get engaged. But I think if we work together, there's this amazing unlock that it's just like, it's so close. It's tantalizingly close, and I think we should continue working towards that goal.
Great, thanks, Carter. How about Sydney?
I mean, echoing everything Aiden and Carter said, but, thankful to be able to join this, and for everyone who participated. I know that much of the audience was, from transit, I think I might have seen public safety as well. And all of those, I mean, these are stakeholders we work very closely with and respect the work that they do in our communities. And so we're grateful for that. And then, again, we would love to see this technology in California when it comes to autonomous trucks. So if anyone ever asks questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to explain and go in a bit more detail. And then the last thing I'll mention is we're going to be at the Mountain View Art and Wine Festival, September 10th and 11th. So please come out and check out the technology.
Great, thanks, Sydney. I should add that we do have several questions left in the chat that we couldn't get to, but we will do email follow-ups to all the participants who sent those questions. So we'll get those answered. So just last closing words from Dan Mitchell at Nuro.
Yeah, and you can actually email us directly, dan@nuro.ai, if you want to learn more. And we have a lot to learn as well, which is why I'm really appreciative of the Bay Area Council and Emily for getting this group together. And this is one of hopefully many conversations we'll be having around how autonomous vehicles will be affecting us in the future in our shared spaces on our roadway, but also hopefully helping improve everyone's everyday life. And it's something that we're really excited about, all these potential benefits. We hope you're excited about it as well. And we hope you're a willing and eager partner to work with us to figure out what that looks like so it's shared and sustainable.
Thanks, Dan. Yes, we will circulate our panelists' contact information in a follow-up email so we can keep the conversation going. And thank you all for joining us. And thanks to our panelists.